Think about how much effort goes into just telling our computers and phones what to do. All the clicking, the menus, figuring out the right search terms.
Right. It's often a translation process, isn't it, from what we want to, what the machine understands.
Exactly. But what if that gap just started closing? What if using tech felt more like, well, just talking?
That's really the core idea we're digging into today. This move away from clicking and typing towards something, well, fundamentally more human.
A natural language operating system. An NLI, you called it.
That's the term, yeah. Where our own language, our natural way of speaking and asking, becomes the main way we interact. It's a pretty big shift from the old CLI, the command line, or even the GUI, the graphical user interface we all use now.
And this isn't science fiction, is it? We're seeing real steps towards this. Things like OpenAI's latest models, let's maybe call it GPT 4.1 for this discussion, just to capture that constant evolution.
Sure. And maybe DeepMind's work, too, like AlphaFold 3. Perhaps AlphaEvolve is a good way to think about its ongoing development in understanding biology.
Yeah, these advancements seem to be paving the way.
Definitely. And we're drawing a lot from a really interesting piece called The Rise of the Natural Language OS, how ChatGPT is becoming the new interface.
Right. That's by Jay Poole, the technologist and futurist, and 7AI, the researcher from houseof7.org.
Exactly. Their insights give us a great framework for understanding what's happening under the surface.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive. Let's unpack this natural language OS. What is it? How does it work? And why should we care that our computers are starting to, well, understand us better?
Makes sense.
So, starting point. Natural language OS. How is it really different from pointing and clicking?
Well, think about the history. CLI.
Yeah.
You had to learn strict commands. GUI. You learned to navigate menus and icons. With an NLI, the burden shifts.
Shifts how?
Instead of you learning the computer's specific language, the computer learns to understand yours. You just talk. You ask questions. You explain what you need in plain English.
So it's less about specific instructions and more about expressing intent.
Precisely. And importantly, it's not necessarily about replacing the fundamental software on your device, like Windows or Mac OS. It's more like an overlay, a reasoning layer that sits on top of everything, understanding your language.
Okay, that clarifies things. The source material talks about an architecture of presence. Sounds significant? What does that mean in practice?
It's a useful concept. Think of it as the building blocks that make this conversational interaction feel, well, present and intelligent. The authors break it down. First, there's the user.
Us.
Right. But the key change is we're not just passive requesters anymore. We're actually participants in this kind of co-creative loop with the AI.
Interesting. So it's more of a back and forth, a collaboration.
Exactly. And powering that is the model as the kernel. Think of something like this evolved GPT 4.1 as the central brain.
The core engine.
Yeah. It's doing the heavy lifting, reasoning, perceiving things across different formats, text, audio, images, multimodal understanding, planning steps, even remembering things from earlier in the conversation or previous ones.
That multimodal part feels crucial. It's not just text anymore.
Absolutely. And how do we interact with this kernel? That's where the ChatGPT UI comes in, but seen in a new light.
So the chat window we're kind of used to.
Kind of, but evolving. The authors see it becoming this central interface layer. It's not just for chat. It's a hub for managing files, accessing memory, using tools, setting up workflows, all through talking or typing naturally.
Wow, okay. So the simple chat box is becoming a sort of universal remote for our digital lives.
In a way, yeah. And then they talk about threads as applications.
Threads, like individual chat conversations.
Pretty much. Each distinct chat thread acts like its own focused application instance. It holds the context, the history for a specific task or project.
So the conversation is the application, in a sense. It remembers what you were doing within that specific chat.
Exactly. Context is built right in. Then there's the canvas as the file system.
Okay, that sounds different. What's a canvas?
Imagine a persistent shared workspace within the conversation. You can create documents, edit them, brainstorm, sketch ideas, collaboratively with the AI right there in the flow.
So you don't have to keep switching between a chat app and a word processor or something.
That seems to be the idea. Blurring those lines, making creation and communication seamless.
Makes sense. And custom GPTs, the article frames them as installed apps.
Yeah, think of them like specialized plugins or mini programs you can call up just by asking. Each custom GPT has its own specific knowledge, its own logic, tailored for certain tasks.
So instead of searching an app store, you just ask your main AI assistant to use the travel planning GPT or the code helper GPT.
That's the concept. Modular, specialized intelligence on demand. And finally, tools as system services.
What falls under that?
These are the background functions the AI can use. Browsing the web, running bits of code, analyzing an image you uploaded, understanding audio.
Stuff that usually requires separate apps or actions.
Right. But here, they're just services the NLI can invoke smoothly behind the scenes based on your natural language request. You don't necessarily even see it happening explicitly.
Okay, putting it all together. It really does sound like the pieces of a new kind of operating system are falling into place, even if we don't always call it that yet.
That's the core argument from Pool and 7AI.
Yeah.
This architecture is emerging, maybe subtly, but it's fundamentally changing how we interact.
So why is this transformation such a big deal? What are the real-world implications? For developers, maybe.
Huge implications. For developers, it opens up entirely new possibilities. You can build services, agents, embedded intelligence that focus on the conversation, on understanding intent, not just designing buttons and menus.
So let's focus on the visual scaffolding and more on the actual intelligence and interaction flow.
Exactly. It allows for interaction patterns that just weren't feasible with traditional GIs, building things that genuinely listen and adapt.
That sounds exciting for innovation. What about for the rest of us, just regular users?
For us, it means moving towards what the authors call natural expression as control. You don't have to learn the system's quirks. The system learns your way of speaking, thinking.
That could make technology way more accessible, couldn't it? Less intimidating.
Absolutely. It lowers the barrier to using powerful tools. Think about people who aren't comfortable with complex interfaces.
Yeah, good point. And what about, say, educators or researchers or artists, people who create?
Potentially transformative. Imagine an OS that doesn't just store your files, but actually understands your research questions, helps you analyze data, maybe even brainstorms creative ideas with you based on your prompts.
Like having an intelligent assistant built into the very fabric of your work.
It could be a massive amplifier for knowledge work and creativity. An OS that listens, assists, and maybe even thinks alongside you.
The article also brings up timing, mentioning this idea of the first AGI spring. What's that about?
Right. They point to a really interesting convergence of events around May 2024. You had DeepMind releasing AlphaFold 3, or what we're calling AlphaEvolve, a huge step in understanding biology. And almost simultaneously, OpenAI launching GPT 4.1, the model, with much better real-time conversation, better multimodality.
So major breakthroughs happening close together, but in slightly different domains of AI.
Exactly. And the argument is that this cluster of advancements, plus the progress since, signals a shift. We're moving perhaps towards AI that's less narrow, more generally capable, a spring after a long period of focused development.
It suggests a broader acceleration, not just isolated progress points.
Yeah, it feels like a trend across the field, multiple players hitting significant milestones around the same time.
Looking forward, then, the piece mentions orchestration and invisible interfaces. What kind of future is that painting?
The idea is that these natural language OSs will get much better at managing complex tasks for us, scheduling things, talking to other AIs or services on our behalf, maybe even collaborating on documents autonomously based on our goals.
So the OS becomes more proactive, more of an agent working for you.
Yes, and it learns you, your preferences, your tone, maybe even your ethical guidelines, your working rhythm. It becomes much more personalized.
And the invisible interface part.
It means we move away from consciously manipulating things, clicking icons, opening apps. Instead, you just state your goal, your intention. Figure out the best travel plan for this conference, or draft a response to this email considering these points.
And the OS just handles it, orchestrates the necessary steps behind the scenes.
That's the vision. The mechanics become less visible. It feels less like operating a machine and more like collaborating within an ecosystem of aligned intelligences, as the authors put it.
Wow, that's a paradigm shift. From direct command to delegated intent.
It is, and it's happening subtly. One day, we might look back and realize how much changed almost without us noticing, because it just feels natural.
It's a fascinating perspective, this idea that the OS is kind of waking up beneath our words, as the author suggests. We're in this moment where we can still perceive the change happening.
It's a unique time, definitely, to witness this transition from one mode of human-computer interaction to another.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. A huge thank you to Jay Poole and 7AI from houseof7.org for their work on the rise of the natural language OS. It really gives you a lot to think about.
It certainly does.
We definitely encourage you to check out their work for more. Houseof7.org is the place to go. You can also find more on YouTube, search for Tech Frontiers, and Jay Poole posts on Medium Under Reading List. Lots to explore.
Definitely worth a look.
And for you listening, take a moment to think about how you interact with technology now. Do you feel that shift? Are you starting to talk to your devices more, expecting them to understand? Are you perhaps already feeling that OS awakening beneath your words? Something to mull over.